It is a Saturday morning in late May, and you are standing at the edge of your driveway, in your work boots, with a cup of coffee going cold in your hand, looking at your front lawn. Half of it is a deep, healthy green. The other half, the half closest to the road, is pale yellow-green, thin, patchy in spots where you can see bare dirt between the blades. You have fertilized this lawn 3 times this spring. Same bag, same brand, same spreader setting, walked the whole yard evenly. The green half got greener, the pale half stayed pale. You walk over to the pale section and crouch down. You pull at a clump of grass and it comes up easily, roots and all, barely 2 inches of root system on grass that should have roots 6 to 8 inches deep. The blades are thin, some have yellow tips. You have seen this section of lawn look exactly like this every spring for 4 years, and every spring you have fertilized it exactly the same way, and every spring it looks exactly the same. $40 a bag, 3 bags a season. $120 a year on a lawn that is half thriving and half struggling, no matter what you do. The fertilizer is not the problem. The fertilizer was never going to fix this. Because the bag of fertilizer you have been buying contains nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Big numbers on the front of the bag. 20-10-10, 24-04. Those 3 numbers are what every lawn fertilizer is built around, and they are real nutrients your grass genuinely needs. But there is a 4th element your grass needs, in much smaller amounts, that is not on that bag at all, that almost no consumer lawn fertilizer includes, and that most lawns in this country are quietly deficient in without anyone ever telling the homeowner. That element is boron. And the cheapest, most reliable source of boron for your lawn is a small box of laundry borax that costs about $2. I am Hope Yoder. I farm a small piece of ground in Lancaster County, and I've spent a good portion of my life paying attention to what grows well and what does not, and why. Boron deficiency in lawns and gardens is one of those problems that hides in plain sight, because the symptoms look like a dozen other things. Thin grass, pale colour, shallow roots, patchy growth in certain areas of the yard and not others. Most people see those symptoms and reach for more nitrogen, which is exactly what the lawn care industry wants. Because more nitrogen means another bag sold, and boron deficiency does not improve with more nitrogen. In some cases, it gets worse. Because nitrogen pushes the grass to grow faster than its boron-starved root system and cell structure can support. Before I go any further, I need to address something directly. Because there is a video circulating right now, several versions of it actually, that tell people to mix a large amount of borax with water and dump it across their entire lawn to kill weeds. And I want to be completely honest with you about this. Some of what is in those videos is real. Borax genuinely does affect certain broadleaf weeds, particularly creeping ground ivy and clover, at concentrations that grass can tolerate. That part is documented, and I will show you exactly how to do it safely later in this video. But the dilution rates in most of those videos are dangerously high, and the application method, dumping concentrated solution in patches rather than spreading it evenly across a measured area, is exactly how people kill large sections of their own lawn and then spend the next 2 years wondering why grass will not grow there again. Boron is unusual among plant nutrients because the gap between deficient and toxic is extremely narrow. With nitrogen, you can over-apply by a significant margin and the grass simply burns a little or grows too fast. With boron, the difference between the amount that corrects a deficiency and the amount that poisons the soil for years is small, and boron does not break down or leach away quickly once it is in the soil. If you over-apply, you are not dealing with a problem for 1 season. You can be dealing with it for several years, because excess boron stays in the soil and continues to be toxic to plant roots until it slowly washes through or is diluted by new soil over time. This is exactly why I am walking you through this carefully, with real measurements, rather than just telling you to sprinkle some powder on your lawn and walk away. Done correctly, this $2 box of borax will do more for your lawn's actual health, root depth, drought tolerance and colour than another season of fertilizer ever will. Done carelessly, it can leave dead patches that take years to recover. Both of those things are true, and I want you to walk away from this video knowing both. Let me explain what boron actually does inside a plant. Because once you understand the mechanism, the application instructions make sense instead of feeling like arbitrary rules. Boron is required for the formation of cell walls in plants. Every new cell a plant grows, every new root tip, every new leaf, every new section of stem requires boron to build the structural compounds that hold that cell together. When boron is deficient, new cell growth is weak and malformed. Root tips, which are constantly producing new cells as the root extends into the soil, are among the first parts of the plant to show the effect. A boron-deficient root system does not extend properly. The root tips become stunted, sometimes swollen or club-shaped, and the root simply stops growing deeper. This is why you pulled up that clump of grass and found 2 inches of root instead of 6 to 8. Boron is also essential for the transport of sugars produced by photosynthesis, from the leaves down to the roots and to other growing parts of the plant. Without adequate boron, the plant produces sugar in its leaves through photosynthesis just fine, but struggles to move that sugar to where it is needed for root growth and for storage. The plant is essentially producing energy it cannot deliver to where the energy is needed most. Boron also plays a role in how plants take up calcium, and calcium is critical for cell wall strength throughout the plant, not just in new growth. A boron deficiency can create a secondary calcium availability problem, even when calcium levels in the soil are adequate. The combined effect of all of this on a lawn is exactly the pattern you see in a boron-deficient section of grass. Shallow roots because root tip development is impaired. Pale colour because the plant cannot efficiently move the products of photosynthesis to support new chlorophyll production in new growth. Thin, patchy growth because new tillers, the new shoots a grass plant sends out to thicken itself, require the same cell wall formation that boron supports. And critically, poor drought tolerance, because a grass plant with a 2-inch root system cannot reach the moisture that a grass plant with a 6-inch root system can reach, which is why that section of lawn is always the first to go brown in a dry spell. Why do lawns become boron deficient in the first place? Several reasons, and they often compound each other. Sandy or light-textured soils hold boron poorly, and it leaches away with rainfall and irrigation more readily than in heavier soils. Soils with high pH, meaning more alkaline soils, make the boron that is present less available to plant roots, even when total boron in the soil is adequate. Heavy, repeated nitrogen fertilization over years can deplete available boron faster than it naturally replenishes, because the increased growth the nitrogen drives requires more boron to support it, creating a deficiency that gets worse the more you fertilize. And soils that have been farmed or landscaped for decades without any boron-containing amendment ever being added simply run out, the same way any nutrient runs out if it is used and never replaced. This is the part the lawn care industry does not talk about. Not necessarily out of dishonesty, but because consumer lawn fertilizer is formulated around the big 3 nutrients that drive visible, fast results. Nitrogen makes grass green up quickly. That is what sells bags of fertilizer. Boron does not produce a dramatic greening effect on its own in the way nitrogen does. Its effects are structural: root depth, cell strength, drought resilience, the kind of improvements that take a full growing season to become visible, and that do not photograph well for a bag label. There is very little incentive for a fertilizer company to include a nutrient that costs them money to add, and that customers will not immediately notice the effect of. A $2 box of borax, sodium tetraborate, applied correctly, once or twice a year, corrects this deficiency for a fraction of what an additional bag of fertilizer costs, and addresses a root cause that more nitrogen cannot touch. Now let me give you the exact method, because the measurements here matter more than in almost anything else I've shown you on this channel. The safe application rate for correcting boron deficiency in turfgrass is approximately 2 to 3 tablespoons of borax dissolved in water and applied evenly across 1,000 square feet of lawn. I want to say that again because it is the single most important number in this video. 2 to 3 tablespoons per 1,000 square feet. Dissolved in at least 2 to 3 gallons of water and applied with a sprayer. So the application is even across the entire measured area, not concentrated in any one spot. To put this in perspective, a standard box of borax, the kind sold in the laundry aisle for around $4 to $5 and containing roughly 76 ounces, contains enough material to treat several thousand square feet using this rate, with material left over. This is genuinely a once-a-year or twice-a-year expense measured in a couple of dollars, not a recurring monthly cost. Here is how to measure your lawn if you do not already know its square footage. Pace off the length and width of your lawn area in large steps, with each step being roughly 3 feet for most adults. Multiply length by width to get approximate square footage. If your lawn is roughly 50 paces by 30 paces, that is roughly 150 feet by 90 feet, or 13,500 square feet. For a lawn that size, you would use approximately 27 to 40 tablespoons of borax, which is roughly 1.5 to 2.5 cups, dissolved in enough water to apply evenly across that whole area using a hose end sprayer or a pump sprayer working in sections. The critical part of the application is evenness. Boron toxicity in lawns almost always happens not because someone used too much total borax, but because they applied it unevenly, dumping concentrated solution in one spot, walking away and coming back to find a dead patch exactly the size and shape of where the watering can tipped. Mix your full measured amount of borax into your full measured amount of water. Stir until completely dissolved because undissolved granules sitting on the soil surface create concentrated hotspots. And apply using a sprayer that distributes the solution as a fine, even mist across the entire area, the same way you would apply a liquid fertilizer or a liquid weed control product. Apply this in early spring, after the grass has begun actively growing, but before the heat of summer. Or in early fall, when grass is recovering from summer stress and beginning a second growth phase. Apply to a lawn that has been watered recently, not to dry, stressed grass, and avoid applying immediately before a heavy rain that could wash the solution into a concentrated area before it has a chance to soak in evenly. For most lawns, one application per year at this rate is sufficient to correct a mild to moderate deficiency over the course of 1 to 2 growing seasons. You will not see overnight greening the way you do with a nitrogen application. What you will see, over the following months, is the section of lawn that was thin and shallow-rooted gradually thickening, the colour evening out compared to the rest of the yard, and most noticeably, that section surviving the next dry spell without browning out as fast as it used to. Now the weed control application, the one those viral videos are reaching for, and how to do it without the risk that comes with how those videos describe it. Creeping ground ivy, also called creeping Charlie, and white clover are both more sensitive to elevated boron levels than turf grass is. This means there is a window, a concentration of borax solution that is high enough to damage or kill these specific weeds, while the surrounding grass, which has a higher tolerance, survives and recovers. This is real, it has been studied, and it works. But the window is narrow, narrower than the deficiency correction rate I just gave you, and it requires spot treatment of the weed patches specifically, not a blanket application across the whole lawn. For spot treatment of ground ivy or clover patches, a solution of 10 ounces of borax dissolved in 4 ounces of warm water, then diluted into 2.5 gallons of water, applied specifically to the weed patches and the immediate area around them, not the entire lawn, can suppress these weeds over several weeks. This solution is significantly more concentrated than the deficiency correction rate and should only be applied directly to identified weed patches, ideally on a calm day with no wind to prevent drift onto desirable grass, and should not be repeated more than once per season on the same area, because repeated applications at this concentration are exactly how you create the long-lasting dead zones that those viral videos cause when people apply this concentration across their entire yard instead of just the weed patches. If you are uncertain, or if your lawn does not have a significant ground ivy or clover problem, skip the weed treatment entirely and use only the deficiency correction rate across the whole lawn. The deficiency correction alone, by improving root depth and grass density, often reduces these weeds naturally over time anyway, because a thick, deep-rooted lawn outcompetes ground ivy and clover for light and space far more effectively than a thin, shallow-rooted one does, regardless of any direct weed treatment. I want to spend a moment on safety, because borax is genuinely low toxicity compared to most lawn chemicals. But low toxicity is not the same as no precautions. Borax is significantly less toxic to mammals than most synthetic herbicides and pesticides, and it breaks down into naturally occurring boron compounds that exist in soil and water already at low levels. That said, keep pets and children off the treated area until the solution has dried completely, which is typically a few hours under normal conditions. Wear gloves when handling concentrated borax powder, as it can dry out skin with repeated contact. Store any unused borax in its original container, clearly labelled, away from where children could access it, the same as you would any household product. And do not apply this to vegetable gardens or around plants other than turf grass without researching that specific plant's boron tolerance first, because many garden plants, particularly beans and some fruit trees, are considerably more sensitive to boron than grasses. Now I want to talk about what this actually saves you, because the honest math here is significant. A typical homeowner following a standard 3 to 4 application per season fertilizer program, the kind sold as a bundle at most hardware stores, spends somewhere between $90 and $160 per year on fertilizer alone for an average-sized lawn, before considering any additional weed control, grub control, or lawn service fees. If a professional lawn care service is involved, with their own fertilizer and weed control applications throughout the season, the annual cost for an average lawn typically runs between $300 and $600. The $2 box of borax, applied once a year at the deficiency correction rate, addresses a root cause that none of those programs address, because none of them include boron. This does not mean you stop fertilizing entirely. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are real needs, and a lawn benefits from appropriate fertilization. But it means that the persistent, thin, pale, shallow-rooted section of lawn that has not responded to years of fertilizer is very likely responding to a deficiency that fertilizer was never formulated to fix. And the fix for that deficiency costs about $2 and lasts most of a year. Over several years, a lawn with corrected boron levels, deeper roots, denser growth, and better drought tolerance often requires less supplemental watering during dry spells, recovers faster from foot traffic and mowing stress, and naturally resists the weeds that move into thin, weak turf. The $2 correction this spring is doing work that the more expensive program has been unable to do for years, because it is solving a different problem than the one the expensive program was built to solve. This is something I think about more broadly than just lawns. So much of what gets sold to us, for the yard, for the garden, for the house, is built around the visible, fast-acting fix. The thing that produces a result you can see within days, because that is what sells. The slower structural fixes, the ones that take a season to show their full effect, but that address the actual underlying cause, often cost almost nothing and are almost never mentioned, because there is no ongoing product to sell once the underlying problem is corrected. This is the kind of knowledge, the underlying cause knowledge rather than the fast visible fix knowledge, that my family has accumulated across generations of working this ground. And it is what I have tried to put into the books. The garden and soil knowledge, what your soil is actually missing and how to correct it for almost nothing, rather than buying another bag of something that treats a symptom. The planting calendar, the household methods that address root causes rather than selling you a recurring fix. All of it documented from real use on this property across generations. The link is in the description if you want it. And if you want more of this kind of thing regularly, not just in occasional videos but ongoing, lessons on soil, on the garden, on stretching a household budget the old way, with a place to ask questions when you get stuck, that is what the community at the link is for. I will not bring it up again in this video. Here is what I want you to do. This week, walk your lawn the way you did at the start of this video. Find the section that has never responded to fertilizer the way the rest of the yard does. Measure it, roughly, pacing it off is fine. Pick up a $2 box of borax at the store. This weekend, dissolve 2 to 3 tablespoons per 1,000 square feet in 2 to 3 gallons of water. Mix it completely and spray it evenly across that section. And honestly, across the whole lawn if you want the same correction everywhere. Mark your calendar for this time next spring to do it again. Then wait. Not for tomorrow, for the next dry spell in July, and see whether that section holds its colour the way it never has before. Tell me in the comments whether you have a section of lawn that has never responded to fertilizer no matter what you tried, and what you have tried. And if your father or grandfather had his own way of dealing with thin patches in the yard, lime, ashes from the wood stove, something else entirely, tell me about it. Those old methods, the ones that never made it onto a bag label, are exactly the kind of thing that gets lost when nobody writes it down. I read every single one. Next time, since today was about what your lawn is missing below the surface, I'm going to show you the old method my father used for testing what your soil actually needs before you put anything on it at all, using nothing but vinegar, baking soda, and a little water. 2 simple tests, 5 minutes, and you will know more about your soil than most bags of fertilizer ever bother to ask. Subscribe so you do not miss it. That $2 box sitting in the laundry aisle has been doing this work for longer than any fertilizer bag has existed. That is how the careful old folks dealt with ground that would not green up no matter what they fed it. That is how it is still done on any piece of ground that remembers.